Sure. Okay. Okay. Wonderful. So let me introduce our bishop, Brother Bishop. It is our esteemed honor to welcome Monsignor David Martinez de Aguirre Guinea from País Vasco, from Spain, in the Basque Country, and Anotontono, an autonomous district of Spain, for which he actually is visiting his family and zooming to us from the País Vasco this morning. He's a graduate of Salamanca. He studied at the École Biblique. He served in places like Bilbao, and then Peru and Cusco, the Vicariate of St. Rose of Lima in Peru, then was named Bishop of Puerto Maldonado, Peru, at the bridge of Amazonia, and now is the Special Secretary to the Synod of Bishops of Amazon region. So it is a great treat to have you, Brother Bishop, and brother to us all in the Dominican family. Welcome.
Yeah.
Good morning to you, and good afternoon here in Spain. And it is an honor to me. I feel quite shy being with you here, but it is a pleasure at the same time to share with the order, with the Dominican family, information about this corner, which is so important in the planet. The Amazon region, an important corner for humanity, for the life of the planet, and therefore important for Dominican men and women. So, thanks for inviting me, and let me share a brief presentation. I have created this presentation gathering information from different sites, and there's also part of what I presented in the General Chapter in Tlaltenango in Mexico in August 2022, because I was invited by the Master of the Order to respond, to give an answer to a question. And the question was, why is there a mission of the Order of Preachers in the Amazon today? That was the question. And of course, that question relates to the Vicariate in Puerto Maldonado. This is a jurisdiction that was entrusted to the Order. So, Saint Dominic, our father, did not want priests to be bishops, but we have made an exception in this case because the order wants to create a local church in this corner of the Amazon, and that is the reason one of the Dominicans there had to accept this service. So I'm going to share with you some information about the Amazon. So this is a mission in the Amazon, in the Peruvian area. And I want to start with a quote from Querida Amazonia, number 5. And the Pope says, this exhortation is addressed to the whole world, to all the faithful. I'm doing so to help awaken their affection and concern for that land, which is also ours, and to invite them to value it and acknowledge it as a sacred mystery. But I also do it because the church is concerned for the problems of this area, obliges us to discuss, however briefly, a number of other important issues that can assist other areas of our world in confronting their own challenges. So, point 5 of Querida Amazonia seems important to me because it highlights the fact that somehow Pope Francis wanted to place the Amazon region in the heart of the church, wanted to make out of it a big concern for the church because it is extremely relevant for the planet. And also because he thinks that in the Amazonian region, there are movements, tensions, and energies which can be good for the rest of humanity and for the church herself. Pope Francis started his pontificate telling the Brazilian bishops in Brazil that the Brazilian Amazon was the trial territory for what could be done by the church. And this started with the Synod for the Amazon, and many of the questions that were treated in the heart of the church regarding the Amazon are being dealt with at a global level. So this synod is somehow an extension of what the Pope started to do with the special synod for the Amazon. So the Amazonian region right now, because of how relevant it is for the planet, is a place that represents the periphery. And it is a place where the Pope thinks that important changes for humanity can take place, important changes for humanity, for the planet, and for the church. And we will see later on that this is not the first time that something like this happens in the history of humanity. So Brendan was asking me to talk about the Amazonian region and the order of preachers and the struggles to promote respect and dignity in this region. And we are going to organize a forum from the 2nd to the 8th of July in Puerto Maldonado. I'm going to talk about this as well. So this region is extremely rich, and we have become more aware of the fact that the Amazon is a territory. This started before the Synod, and this awareness became stronger after the Synod. So there are 8 countries that constitute it, and an overseas territory. So we're talking about Brazil, Bolivia, Ecuador, Venezuela, and Guyana, French Guyana, English Guyana, and we're talking about 6.7 square kilometers, 6.7 million square kilometers of forest. We're talking about 2,200 new species that were identified in 1999, but the number of species identified is increasing all the time. There's 10% of the world reserve of CO2. It has been occupied for years. Some indigenous populations are isolated. We are talking about 2.1 million square kilometers of protected areas, 2,500 different species of fish, 210,000 cubic meters of fresh water that go to the Atlantic Ocean every second. I think that we're talking about 210 million liters. And from 17 to 20% of the fresh water of the country is there. And we're also talking about 40,000 different plant species. And of course, these figures change all the time. So this is an ecosystem. It is a territory which is equivalent to twice the Indian territory, and it is the biggest tropical forest in the world, and at least 10% of the biodiversity of the planet is there. And its rivers represent between 15 and 16% of the rivers that go to the oceans in the world. The Amazonian basin, this river is the longest river in the world. It is 6,600 kilometers long. This is an extremely long river that goes throughout Peru. And we're talking about 6,600 kilometers. And it contains a huge number of fish species, and it has between 90 and 140,000 million tons of CO2. And it is the biggest river in the world. Its flow is the biggest, is equivalent to 225,000 cubic meters per second. So this shows the richness and the unique biodiversity of this area. And obviously this has an impact in the planet. I think that there are brothers and sisters from Canada, and I was learning that part of the problems that are in Canada have to be with the fact that winds do not always come from the Amazon. We are talking about subterranean waters and flying rivers. Scientists talk about flying rivers, which are important for the cooling of the cooling effect of the climate. And these flying rivers depend on the Amazon, because the Amazonian forest is like a big pump that sends tons of water to the atmosphere. And these flying rivers cool and take part in the water cycle. And everything is interconnected. When we talk about the Amazon, we are talking about a biome that has an impact not only in South America, but also in North America and it also has an impact at the level of the planet. That's why it is so important, so relevant. This region also has the richness of the peoples that inhabit it. And we will look at that later on. We are talking about different cultures which are at different developmental levels, stages. And therefore, looking at these peoples, we can rethink things and we can find new paths different from the paths we have before us at the moment. That's why this region represents a richness, because of the cultures of the peoples and because of the biome. That's why this region is a place that can help us rethink our relationship with the planet and rethink ourselves as humanity, as faithful, as church. So as Dominicans, we could, like the Pope has done, think of the Amazon as a privileged place that can help us rethink ourselves as a church. So here you can see the vicariate, you can see the whole region, the various countries, and this is where we are. We're talking about 150,000 square kilometers. The state of Georgia in the USA is 153,000 square kilometers, and the vicariate in the Amazon is 150,000 square kilometers. So the bishop visits the various parish areas. He can't even go to all the communities, and it takes him about 4 months to do so. And he can only spend a day in each place because the territory is so vast. So this vicariate we have not given a lot of information about the mission we carry out in this part of the world. Our presence there started in the year 1900. So this area was entrusted to the Order of Preachers. And at that time, the automobile industry found the rubber tree that allowed automobile companies to make tires. So in order to exploit these resources, there was a huge genocide of the indigenous populations. So we decided to create the missions, to create schools, and to respond to the situation. So the order has been present there for 123 years. We're talking about over 220 friars who have been there, 8 Dominican bishops. We founded a congregation, the Dominican missionaries of the Rosary, who are present in 22 countries, and there is a nuns monastery, and we also have lay movements. So the whole Dominican family is present there. We have a population of 350,000 inhabitants. and most of them are concentrated in one part of the region, and there are other areas where there's no population at all. 10% of the population is constituted by Amazonian indigenous populations, and others are indigenous populations from the Andean region who have moved to find fertile soil. The Dominican friars have 7 parishes and missions, and the diocesan clergy has 15 parishes. There are 2 parishes that are taken care of by Clero Fidei Donum, and we have also agreements with other vicariates. We are 18 Dominicans, 26 diocesan priests, 3 priests from other dioceses. There are 10 professed nuns and 17 of them who are information. They are nuns of they are contemplative nuns, and we also have sisters from other congregations, 12 Dominicans of the Rosary, and 24 religious of other congregations that do not belong to the order of preachers. Now, when I talk about the problems we've got in this region, I also want to highlight their contribution, the diversity of their culture, their spirituality, their wisdom, their vision of the world. All this represents a richness for for the whole world. And there are lots of young people. Also, this region is a source of fresh water. It is a source of biodiversity. This is important for feeding the world. It also has minerals and other products, and it has a natural resources. This woman, you see, is Rita Semperi. She really likes us prayers, and she was together with the Pope. But there are also difficulties in this area. If you see on the right, you see what mining does to this area. The Amazonian region is seen as a place that can be used to extract resources that are used to satisfy the needs of the planet. And this has an impact in certain parts of the Peruvian territory. And you can see the effects of the exploitation. This is just a sample of what happens. And there is gold mining, which implies the destruction of ecosystems, also the cultivation of cocaine. And this has to do with drug trafficking. And there are extensive plantations of cocaine. And also many poor people come to our territory looking for a job, and what they find is illegal jobs that are linked to illegal activities, crime. And about 80% of young people end up working illegally. They have no other ways to earn a living. So either they grow cocaine leaf, they work in illegal logging, and in 80% of the vicariate, young people have no choice but to work illegally. Young people migrate and they don't want to destroy the planet. They don't want to destroy the territory, and therefore they leave the area to look for other possibilities outside of this territory. There is a loss of cultural values, family values, and the indigenous populations also have to face specific challenges. Their territory is invaded, is damaged and destroyed in order to extract the resources. And people in the city cannot understand that the indigenous population have vast territories there. An indigenous person from Brazil used to say, "You are telling us that we have vast territories, but what we say is that really we are very few people and we have to defend this vast territory." So the way these indigenous populations live is not understood. Their lifestyle is not understood. They depend on the forest. If the forest is alive and healthy, they can live. If the forest is not alive and healthy, they disappear together with the forest. And there are problems regarding education in this area. The indigenous population have have problems with education and cannot make themselves understood. There are problems regarding health policies. They are excluded from decision making at the national level. The whole nation, apart from them, decide on what happens in their territory, but they cannot take part in decision making regarding policies that concern their territories. And also the exploitation and extraction activities have a social and an environmental impact, and all this transforms them and turns them in something that they're not, because models of society are imposed on them that are not in line to the way they live. They're not in line with their culture. So the Synod for the Amazon has made this area more visible, and the dreams in Querida Amazonia are a social dream that talks about the need to understand these people, to take care of the culture, of the forests, of the richness of this area. There is an ecclesial dream of Christian communities that can devote themselves and work in this region so that we find another way of being a church. And the Amazonian peoples give us an opportunity to find a new path for humanity and for the church. This is what was felt in this region after Laudato Si. after Synod, the Synod for the Amazon, after Querida Amazonia. So the indigenous populations have felt that their church can accompany them. And the church is also understanding the fact that these populations give the church an opportunity to reinvent herself. Now, the indigenous population are extremely rich. We have original populations. We've got the people from the Andes, people who have come from the Andean region to the forest. And the Amazon allows us to think of the planet, to appreciate its beauty, and to think of survival. Let us look at the landscape, the forest, the different regions in the vicariate. And as Dominican women and men from the periphery, together with the gospel, we have transformed the world. And that's what I was saying in the general chapter in Toltenango. The Dominicans arrived with their vision, with their ideology, with their theology, and they came to a new world to teach. And in contact with this indigenous population, the friars were capable of allowing themselves to be transformed. So they transformed their ideology, and they were capable of going back to the world they traveled from in order to change it, to transform it. And we can think of Francisco de Vitoria, we can think of the laws of the Indies, and we can think of the World Declaration of Human Rights, and hopefully we will be talking about the rights of the land soon. So we are talking about people who allowed themselves to be touched by that world they wanted to evangelize. So they themselves are also touched and evangelized thanks to the contact with the indigenous population. And this gives rise to a change in the world. So what I was saying is, if they were capable of doing this, why can't we do it now? As an order, we have an opportunity to allow our hearts to be touched so as to transform our relationship with the planet and our relationship with others among ourselves. And I was also talking about challenges. And, you know, this Forum of the Order that is going to take place from the 2nd to the 8th of July is an answer to this idea that one province only cannot take care of this Amazonian project. The whole order has to share in the positive impact that a project of this sort can have in the whole order. So the whole order has to be part of this university, which is a place where they can learn. The whole Dominican family has to take part in this initiative. And how can we give an answer to these challenges? We give an answer from a network of indigenous schools, and we have realized that education is the only way in which we can help these people develop respecting their structure. This is what the indigenous population ask for. They ask for education, and this is what they thank us for, what they appreciate the most. So we've got a network of 90 indigenous schools, and this network of schools is formed by schools that offer bilingual education. We also have the lay ministries. We think that the cultures in the area have to take part, have to be part of the structures of the church. We also think that it is necessary to be present in the state universities. And we also think that it is important to give formation in the seminar. Here we say we need friars, but really we should put, we need members of the Dominican family. Now, this is a young girl from Montetori, Pachilenga, and she's saying that she is waiting for you to go and visit the Amazonian region. And she says, thanks to you for your contribution. These are peoples who have wanted to get in touch with the other indigenous populations and with the mission. So, brothers and sisters, thank you very much for your attention. This is what I wanted to share with you. And here I am for whatever you want to share with me.
Wow. Wow. Amazing sharing of the experience of Amazonia and desde el base, from the base of the people's voice. I'm sure we have plenty of comments and questions, so if you could bear with us, we would love to share a little bit of our impressions from your presentation.
Thank you, Bishop David. I'm just wondering, with all of the land right and human right abuses, what is the level of violence that the people suffer, or is that not a real challenge as well?
Yes, that is a challenge, sister. In the vicariate, I mean, we could say so much about this, but if we talk about mining, if we talk about the extraction of resources, the Pope says it very clearly in Laudato Si. He says that environmental degradation goes together with social degradation, particularly in the area of Madre de Dios. There's the problem of trafficking of human beings. This is linked to gold mining, to logging activities. And there is also the problem of the land. The territories of native communities and populations are invaded, and peasant communities are invaded, and there are organized groups, gangs, mafias, and they deal with drug, they deal with drug trafficking, logging, mining, prostitution, people trafficking, and also land dealings. And these mafias are increasing. I see that in the vicariate. All the bishops in the area see that the criminal mafias and gangs are increasing, and of course they don't respect human rights. They don't even respect the basic rights, the right to water, the right to land, the right to freedom, because you get armed gangs that expel people from the territory. In my vicariat, in the area of Madre de Dios, in the last few years, we four people have been killed because they were defending their territory. And there are miners who pretend to be ecologists. They pretend to be farmers, and they are so powerful. And there's complicity from the government officials, and the people who act there, they do it with absolute impunity. And there are some areas where it's very difficult for us to go. In mining areas, priests are doing whatever little they can do. We are talking about diocesan priests, but I am talking about parish priests who talk to me about a visit they carried out months ago, and they say to me, the other day they burned 3 people who were stealing, who were robbing. And, miners are supposedly poor families who came from the hills and invaded that area and started to devastate the territory, and they became increasingly powerful. And these people, when they see other indigenous people who go there to their territory to steal something, they just kill them and burn them. So one of the priests was talking to me about 3 young people who were stealing and were killed and burned. So probably these 3 young people who were killed and burned were criminals themselves, but they were burned alive. So what we're trying to do in the areas where gold mining has not yet arrived, but we think the gold mining companies might arrive, what we're trying to do is empower those communities. We're trying to organize groups and committees who are aware of their rights, the right to land. We use the resources from REPAM, the PAN and Amazonian network. We go to the United Nations and talk about these situations, these events. So this is what we are trying to do, which is very little, obviously, because the problem is so vast.
Thank you, Bishop. My question is, who owns the mines? And maybe you said this and I missed it. What companies and where are they from that are owners of who are the miners, the owners of the mines?
They're not owners in the area of Madre de Dios. The forest has concessions. There are territories that belong to the state, and the state allows private individuals or companies, they give them a concession so that for 20 or 30 years they can go there and exploit their territory. In Peru, things are not like things in the United States, where those who own the territory owned also the ground. In Peru, they are owners of the surface. So the underground, the subsoil, belongs to the state, and the state gives a concession to an individual or to a company so that they extract a given resource in a given territory for a certain number of years. So normally we're not talking about owners, but concessions. And we are not talking about huge companies in most cases. I was together with the Matsureng population for 15 years. I lived there. They are in the Cusco region. And the oil companies would go there to extract natural gas. And I lived together with the Aboriginal populations, and it was easy for us to identify the enemy, so to speak. So we were able to set certain criteria, and we were able to enter into dialogue with them. But in this area, when we talk about the Amazon forest, there are many poor people who come from the Andes. They come from the Andes to the forest, and they occupy the forest. So we're not talking about one company or one individual. We're talking about 60,000 people who are trying to find a way to live, and they invade the forest. So we're not talking about companies. We cannot ask them, therefore, to carry out a research and to assess the environmental impact of what they do. We cannot apply legislation. And the government does nothing. The government only gives concessions, and very few are the ones who have a concession. Most have no concession at all. They just come from the Andes, they invade the territory, and that's it.
Thank you, Bishop. Your words are more than touching and frightening. The Dominican Month for Peace, okay? What is one hope you have? Because Dominicans all over the world will be focused on Amazon.
Well, my one hope is that, everybody wants what they love to be loved by those they love. So, as a Dominican, I myself, as a member of the Dominican family, which is my family, a family I love, well, my one hope is that they fall in love with the Amazon. And I want them to fall in love with the Amazon, because I think that it is important for the order to be touched, to be transformed. It is good for us to allow our heart to be transformed by the Amazonian peoples and by this ecosystem. In my vicariate, well, my desire, my hope is that the order can be present in the Amazon. This is an opportunity that the church gives to us. You know, the other day they were telling me in the seminar they need philosophy professors, they need theology professors, because they want to form young people for a church that has an Amazonian face. And we might wonder if a professor might come from another part of the world and come here to form people who have an Amazonian face, people who are from this region. But you know, I think that in the order we have this richness. If Pedro of Cordoba did that, if Bartolome did that, and so many others in our history have done this, a formation which is open and vast, like the Dominican formation is, you know, talking about people who go to a certain place and allow the reality and the situation of the place to touch them, to have an impact of them. Well, I think that is possible. So we can form young men and young women, because we have to open up to the whole people of God. So I think that the order could take part in the formation in the Amazon, in the vicariate. They can take part in formation in the schools, formation of leaders who defend human rights. They can take part in the formation of seminarians, people who minister. And also we can create links, bonds, communion, people who come to this region and get in touch with the people in the area and create bonds and a connection between the Amazon and the place these people come from. I think that this is something very important that we could do as Dominicans. I know what my province of Spain went through, and of the friars of the province, only a few came to the Amazon. But those few who came to the Amazon had a tremendous impact in the rest of the province. So in my formation, I was able to have access to all that richness that came from the Amazon. So I would like to see that exchange of richness between the Dominican family and the Amazon region.
Bishop, I'm thinking of the exchange that you just mentioned. I know that in the Amazon, there is the new church entity, SEAMA, and Cardinal Barato, and the 3 indigenous women who met Pope Francis last month to talk about leadership between the people, particularly the role of women. Can you share something? How do you envision the role of Dominican women with the women in the Amazon?
You know, I really like the fact that you're talking about SEAMA, this ecclesial conference of the Amazon. And this is a model that I think will be spread throughout the universal church. Will be a model for different parts of the church after the synod on synodality. And Jessica, Patricia, and Laura Vicuña, well, you know, Jessica is from our vicariate, and we were talking with her, and she was very happy about this meeting with Pope Francis. In our vicariate in the 1900, Monsignor Ramon Subieta, a Dominican who was in the Philippines and then was asked to come to the Amazon to start his mission, well, he arrived here and got in touch with the indigenous population. And from the very beginning, he realized that he could not enter into those societies without women. He could see the limitations, and one of the first things he decided to do was to look for a group of religious women who would accompany him in his mission in the Amazon, because he was convinced that that was the only way he would be able to relate to these societies. So the Dominican missionaries of the Rosary, that congregation, was born, and it was born in Puerto Maldonado, and now they're present in 4 continents. And when I was appointed as a bishop, there were some congregations of religious women in the order. And what I would tell them was that as women, they could do lots of things here in Puerto Maldonado, and that probably as women they could not be so active in other parts of the world. But here in Puerto Maldonado, they would be able to take part in decision making. This was a place where they could really be active, probably like nowhere else in the world. That's what I would tell the sisters. So I'm very happy with the role that women have here. Of course, there is so much to do still. We have to take steps as an ecclesial institution, and we could do things that would be really helpful. But nevertheless, I think that the church allows us to do many things without being eccentric. The church allows us to work towards acknowledging the role of women. And women do a lot in the church here in the Amazon. So this is a process. And certainly the role of women regarding the leadership of Christian communities, rural communities, or leading the church processes, well, it's something that we see. Women have an active role, and I've always liked the fact that women have an active role. And when the Pope was saying that in the Amazon we have a sort of a test bench, well, I think this is quite right, because we have to do certain things here because there is a need for people, and women feel free to do things. And bishops here acknowledge that women can minister. So they acknowledge that women can have a role that in other places is only a role that men have. Also, there is the female view and a vision. We see this in SEAMA, and Querida Amazonia and the Synod for the Amazon, we're talking about a bishop's body, an episcopal body. When we started this with Pope Francis, what we said was that it was an ecclesial body, not an episcopal, a bishop's body. So it started as a bishops' or episcopal body, and because it started as such, it was connected with the dicastery for bishops. And of course, women have no place in the dicastery for bishops. That was the problem. That was the thing. In SEAMA, we could not talk about women. But when we changed things, we reflected, we said that SEAMA was a body where the indigenous population, laymen and laywomen, would take part. That religious men and religious women would take part in that, bishops would take part. And at the beginning of August, we are going to celebrate the first formal assembly in which all of them will take part. So I think that the Amazon region allows us to rethink ourselves as a church, because of the role that women have in the church in the Amazon right now. So that's a contribution to the whole universal church from this region.
We take a moment and just invite the bishop to speak directly in his language. Maybe Dusty can help me on relieving us of our Anglophone speech and let it be from our brother directly. We will take.
Okay.
Let's
Okay,
go.
okay. Okay, bueno, thank you very much. I'm waiting you in our vicariato, yeah, in Puerto Maldonado. You can have a very good experience with us, yeah, and with the original people. Thank you. Gracias. Like the Machirenga people said, indagati maika narno sinetaka nonempi virueli. He dicho,
Wow.
ahí está bien. Terminamos por hoy y he estado muy contento de estar con ustedes. I'm very happy that I can stay with you in this evening for me, afternoon.
Wonderful. Magnifico. Un abrazo.